try and remember to stand here so I don't block the screen. I'm Brenda Boardman. I'm here as a representative of Low Carbon Oxford North. I've been a member of that organisation, I think almost since its beginning, but anyway, several years. And I am, as you can see from the first slide, an emeritus fellow at the University of Oxford. I've worked on energy in the home since about 1980, so just for a few years. And what I'm talking to you about today is how you start learning about your own home if what you're going to do, which I hope you all are, is something about energy efficiency. And partly, I'm also here representing the housewarming project, which we've got a stall out there, which we've been doing in Low Carbon Oxford North. We're nearly at completion. We've got several of the papers. And you're going to have a long presentation about that from Jane later. And what we're trying to do is put onto paper some of the questions and the issues to think about when you're doing insulation energy efficiency. It's very strongly a fabric first approach. Now, I want to make sure you've understood that what we do in our homes and what we do in our personal life is extremely important. It actually represents about half of our emissions as a country. So you can see home energy, the way in which we use any private cars that we've got, if we fly, and public transport represent 50% of the carbon emissions that come from us and our activities. The other 50% are wrapped up in what we buy. And that includes things like street lighting. So there's a lot of things here that we can't influence. There are some that we can, but the 50% we can, the blue bit is what I'm talking about today. The most important initial step is to understand what an energy performance certificate is. Now, how many in this room know the EPC for their own home? Just put up your hand. Well done, that's just over half. And if I said to you, what is it? You'd know what it is. Just nod if so. Good, good, good. It is the first step towards understanding something about your house. It's not everything, but it's a very good first step. As you can see, it's rated from A to G, the best and the worst. And we've all strived in the past, I think, to get A-rated fridges or even A++ fridges as they were for a bit, or washing machines. We know we've got A's on TVs. Now what we've got to do is try and move up that scale with our house. And it's based on a thing called a standard assessment procedure, SAP, and that rates it. So you can see that if you've only got 1 to 20 SAP, then you're in a G. And if you've got to be up at an A, you've got to be close to 100. It really is an extremely difficult target, A-rated. If you rent or buy a new property, you must be shown an EPC in theory before you make the decision to go ahead and when you're choosing. Unfortunately, that bit of the legislation is not working terribly well. So some people will rent without even knowing what the EPC is, or buy for that matter. Okay, let me tell you a little bit more about what the Energy Performance Certificate does and does not do. It is based, the idea of an EPC is that it enables you to choose when you are renting or buying between two properties on an identical basis. It doesn't tell you anything about your lifestyle. It doesn't tell you anything about the lifestyle of the previous occupant. It tells you about, in this particular property, what energy would be used for space heating, hot water, and fixed lighting. It's therefore in the average home, if you're almost all gas, doesn't include the gas for cooking, but it includes all the rest, and very little electricity. It does not include the electricity for your TV, your washing machine, your cooker or anything like that, if you have an electric cooker. Inevitably, there are quite a lot of subjective judgments in an EPC. If you're going to get one, and I hope those of you who couldn't raise your hand are going to get one, if you haven't got one and you're going to, please don't go for the cheapest. The cheapest really are rather poor level of standard and quality and service. Go for something that's a little bit more expensive than the cheapest, and make sure it's somebody whose opinion you value and whose knowledge you believe in. I mean, for instance, if you can't see the insulation in the loft or in the vaulted wall part of the roof, if you don't know what's underneath the flagstones in the kitchen, do you assume there's insulation there, or do you assume insulation isn't there? And sometimes, of course, these are being done in properties with no occupier. Maybe the previous person's died or something. So there are a lot of assumptions. So it is a guide. It's the best guide we've got. It is not foolproof. As I said, it's fairly theoretical. It assumes, for instance, that every property is heated to the same temperature, 21 degrees in the living rooms, 18 degrees elsewhere. Yes, so it's approximately the same. And it's specific to your house and your not your lifestyle. But please, you do need to get one. One of the reasons you need to get one, increasingly, is because policy is being based on the energy performance certificate. Anyone who is a landlord should know that already, because those people who are in rented a property, it is already illegal to rent a property that is F or G, the bottom two bands, whether or not it has stayed occupied. And a higher standard is coming, and you've got to talk about that coming up. The D is about the current average. There is a discussion that this F and G will go up to C as a minimum from 2025. I'm a bit lost as to whether it's already legislation or not. There is a discussion that all of us as owner-occupiers will have to have a house at a standard of C before we can legally sell it. There's a whole lot of issues around that statement, but and in particular, I hope it won't prevent us doing it. It will just make it more of a penalty if we do it. So for instance, I hope what will happen is that if I've got a D-rated property to sell, it will sell for less money because it's not C, but it won't prevent me selling it. But this is being discussed within government, and it's actually quite difficult because the EPC is such a wobbly issue. We wouldn't want to see an EPC challenged in the courts, for instance. It's quite a difficult combination. As I indicated, A is what we need for climate change. Ideally, we have a house that is so well insulated, we don't need a heating system. Just think about that. So well insulated, you don't need a heating system. If it's new build, it's called passive house. And if you do a conversion, it's called ENOFIT, which is the equivalent. And passive house means that even if there is some heating source, like a stove, it's got no moving parts in it. So there's no pumps or anything. So increasingly, policy is being based on the energy performance certificate. So it's and if you suddenly find you've got an F, you've got rather a lot of work to do. So it's best to learn, I think. About the energy performance certificates, it's very, very easy to find out all the details about the EPC on your house. If you put into Google, into your search engine, the energy performance certificate, and find a certificate comes up, and you can get all of the details there. Anyway, I did our road. It did not take me more than about a quarter of an hour to do the whole lot, including this pie chart. And there are 52 houses in our road, 57 properties if you include the rented ones. What was really interesting, I did it about a year ago, but I don't think it's changed. Half didn't have one. Bit worse than you. Of the remainder, we only had one house, and that's built brand new, which was a B. We had one house which was an F, really bad, and it's being converted now because unfortunately the previous occupants died. There were several that had expired, including ours, which is a bit embarrassing. And nobody tells you. If your MOT is due, you get a letter from the DVLA. If your EPC has expired, nobody tells you. You just have to think about it. And the rest were half and half, Ds and Es. So we're not doing very well as a North Oxford society, and certainly in our street and probably as a country, in terms of using the EPC, making the most of them, and we could be doing more. Okay, another thing to think about is in terms of preparing yourself for what to do on your home, is making sure you know where your energy is going to the extent it's possible. It is just very difficult with some of them. For instance, you'll never ever quite work out how much electricity you use in lighting. It's just sort of one of those, there's just too many sources apart from anything else. This is what's called an in-house display. Has anybody got one of these? You have, you have, you have. Did you get it with a smart meter? Yes? Yes, yes. If you use it properly, it's what makes a smart meter smart. A smart meter is not particularly smart otherwise. It's only smart if you respond to the information on that. Because it tells, one of the things it can tell you is that how much electricity you're using at this precise moment in time. So you put on the cooker and it goes up by 2,800 watts. You put on the kettle and it goes up by 2,800 watts or thereabouts. You turn the lighting off and it goes down by 5 watts or so it gives you a balance. This one does electricity and gas. So if you haven't got one, they are available on the web. They're 40, 50 quid, I think. So you can get them. And it's a very, very useful. And it's quite important for you to understand the difference between kilowatts, the power demand at an instant, and kilowatt hours, that instant multiplied over a whole hour. So we used to 100-watt bulbs, that's a power demand. If you have a 100-watt bulb on for 10 hours, that's 1 kilowatt. 1 kilowatt hour, sorry, getting confused. Okay, what else can you do? There's a lovely thing called Pileo, and I'm giving you the reference here. Pileo helps you monitor, it records your meter readings if you put them in. And we've done that in our house now since the middle of 2009. That is our electricity and gas consumption at 33 Beechcroft Road from on a monthly basis. Now, there's some good and bad things. I was looking at this and thinking, the first thing is the peak has come down. The top one is gradually coming down. The second one is the shoulders, by which I mean autumn and spring, are growing. I've got bigger shoulders. Another interesting thing you can see from this, to start with, I had no gas at all during the summer. None at all, because we had solar thermal providing hot water. Unfortunately, it's a very old system and I didn't maintain it properly. And it's got a hole in it and we can't find the hole. So now I've got electricity to heat my hot water in the summer, which is very annoying, but I can't think what to do next. The saddest thing of all about this is that the biggest usage year was 2021, last year. I thought I'd been gradually doing things, but then of course we had COVID. John and I were both working at home. Did that really make a difference? And of course, the weather makes a difference in cold winters. And by the way, when it's level, when there are 2 or 3 readings that appear to be level, sort of like that, and that is because I forgot to do the monthly reading, so it evens them out over. So you've got to sort of imagine. Anyway, it's a little bit of a bore, but on the other hand, it's very interesting finding out what you have and have not achieved. In preparation for your discussions in your own home, I just putting up here how much carbon comes from the different fuels and what the price of gas and electricity are at the moment. We have made a phenomenal change in the carbon intensity of the electricity that we use. It's gone from 500 grams per CO2 equivalent per kilowatt hour, and it's down at about 200. And every time there is a new wind farm on the North Sea, that number goes down even more. What the effects of the Ukraine war may be a little bit of a blip, but still. We used to say, stick with gas and phase out electricity for climate change purposes. We do not say that now. And this is why the whole discussion about heat pumps is becoming interesting, because they're getting close to parity in carbon terms. Particularly, it'll be less than that if you buy, if you buy green electricity. The real bummer is this one. We all know that the fuel prices are going up. That is the price per kilowatt hour at your meter at this precise moment in time. And in October, that is the number that's going to go up, brackets, a lot. Now, so it does look like, why would I use a heat pump? You would use a heat pump because every kilowatt hour that goes into the heat pump, if it is well designed, if it is efficient, produces 3 kilowatt hours of heat. It's what's called a coefficient of performance. So it actually produces more heat than you would have expected for the consumption. So if you divided the 28 by 3, you'd be down at 9p, thereabouts. Meanwhile, your gas is going into a boiler, which may be 80 or 90%. It'll never get more than 90, and if it was brand new, it would be 90. So let's say it was 80%. So therefore, that would also be about 9 pence per unit of delivered energy in your house. So we are getting to parity in energy terms if what you do is compare a gas boiler today with a heat pump tomorrow. It is getting there. And by the way, the last price increase was much bigger for gas than it was for electricity, I know in percentage terms. And I think there's some talks about heat pumps coming up. So as a checklist, if you've got to do any maintenance on your property, for goodness sake, do it now. If you've got some slipping tiles on the roof, if you've got a gutter that overflows and makes the wall wet, if you've got a broken window pane, do all of that basic maintenance before you start thinking about the energy efficiency, because otherwise you don't want to put loft insulation in and then get water dripping on it, for instance. You don't want water dripping in your house, full stop. I've suggested that you read your meters regularly. If you don't know what you're using at the moment, you might do it on an almost daily basis. Every morning, 9 o'clock, read the meter, or every evening at 9 o'clock or something, and put a note in. I put the tumble dryer on today. I did a big cook. My grandchildren came to stay and had two huge hot baths, whatever, you know, just so you begin to understand how your house and your system responds to your demands. So know how you use energy. Think about how your house works. Do you have a room which is particularly cold or hot this weather? Do you have a very drafty room? Which room would you work on first? What's the most important? Do you want to make the warmest room even warmer and ignore the other cold bits? So therefore, what are your plans and your objectives? Quite a few people sort of say to me things like, I'm not going to do anything because I'm going to move in 5 years. Because of the policy implications of energy efficiency, I think that's utterly the wrong answer. You could be literally investing in the value of your property, if not in its legal status, if you do it whether or not you're planning to move. We've got to start taking a slightly different perspective on that. How much money, how much capital are you going to spend? Have you got any capital? There aren't many grants at the moment. There's a small grant for people putting in a heat pump. There are a few people putting in a heat pump, but there aren't many. And I don't think, especially with this government and the present economic situation, I don't think there are going to be many more grants. On the other hand, we're nowhere near achieving the targets we committed to in Glasgow, COP26. So there's pressure on the government to do something, but there is also pressure on the government not to spend money on us. And by and large, if we're an owner-occupier, if you own a property, I think it's your duty to make it energy efficient, not the government's to fund it. That's a lot to do with fuel poverty. Okay, we've got 5 minutes at most for questions. Yes.
Why were the shoulders getting bigger?
I think it's partly because we're working at home more. So whereas previously, if I was in the office or John was in the office, we wouldn't have worried about it being a bit chilly in September or March. But now we do because we're working at home. That's the best. And also, we are getting older, we are getting less tolerant, maybe. I mean, it's a bit strange because we've got a wood stove and we try and use that in the shoulders. So, I mean, it's not a complete answer. We don't always understand ourselves. Someone else, yes.
Yeah, a few questions, thank you. You said electricity is not taken into account, it's gas. Why don't they do that?
Because that's personal to you, whether you have a tumble dryer, whether you have a dishwasher, whether you have 6 televisions or none, those are based on the lifestyle of the person moving into the property, not inherent in the property itself.
And that assumes all houses have gas.
No, it will take into account whether you've got, I mean, if you have all electric,
yeah.
If it's a heat pump or like storage heaters, it would take that into account. I just said for the average, it's gas, because 90% of us use gas.
Sorry, probably. Where did you said we must all get an EPC? Where do we get it?
You can look up an energy performance certificate assessor. I don't know whether anybody here at the fair is.
You said we must get a good, reliable.
Yes, yes. There's one I know, I forget the name of them now, in front of my house in North Oxford, but I don't know them elsewhere. And the best thing, really the best thing, is you go and talk to somebody who's had one done, especially recently, and who says they were very good. To be truthful, if you get a really good one, if you pay a bit more, you should be able to do this. If you get a really good one, you can use them as a sounding board. Oh, is that a problem? Should I be thinking about that? Is that easy to do? Is that expensive to do? You can ask. Go into chat mode, go into interrogation mode, and get your money's worth with it. But
and you said they run out, so
I think it's every 10 years. I think. But if you have work done, it's worth getting it redone. I mean, we're talking about a minimum of 50 quid. We're not talking huge sums. But a friend of mine has just had a very thorough house audit done, and she paid 500. So you can. I don't think you need to pay anything like that. She wanted to get close to, a specification for work. Any more questions? Good questions. Oh, anyone else? Yes.
So I had a question. You said that the requirement for landlords is going to be that they rent many rents level C on EPCs.
Oh, yeah.
Is that achievable by 2025?
It'll be very interesting. I don't know, I forget who's giving that talk, but I didn't think it was yet legislation. I thought it's proposed legislation. There's a whole set of issues behind that. First of all, and even with the F and G, the government does not know who is the landlord. So it's extremely difficult, on average, to enforce a piece of legislation. Oxford City Council is making it mandatory as a landlord to be registered. And if they charge a registration fee, that pays for the service. To make the property C is probably going to cost, I don't know, 10, 20,000. The government is saying no landlord needs to spend more than 3.5, or something like that. So how the landlord gets it to a C, whether the government is going to introduce a loan system to make sure everybody's got to a C, and importantly, once it's a C, is there anything preventing the rent going up? So there's a lot. I think that.
Thank you very much.
Donald, I think that's the last question.
Yes.
Thank you.
I was really speaking for the next 4